You are standing in front of a fence somewhere that doesn't look like a zoo, doesn't look like a park, doesn't look like a laboratory, but has a bit of all three. The air smells of wet earth, damp fur, and biotechnology. On the other side, three white pups run clumsily, biting the world with that wonderful arrogance of a young animal that has not yet discovered taxes, climate change, or Zoom meetings. They jump, growl, stumble, and get back up as if nothing in that newborn body knew that this wasn't supposed to be happening. For a few seconds, it feels like you are looking at an impossible thing, the past breathing again. An animal that should have been dead for thousands of years. A creature that only existed in fossils, museums, scientific illustrations, and, let's be honest, in the minds of anyone who watched Game of Thrones and thought those wolves were too big to be just dogs on an HBO budget. But then comes the detail that almost no one notices in the first headline, because perhaps these pups are not exactly what they said they are. Perhaps humanity has not brought the direwolf back. Perhaps it has done something much stranger and, depending on how you look at it, much more terrifying. Their names are Romulus, Remus, and Khaleesi, meaning ancient Rome, founding mythology, and Game of Thrones squeezed inside a high-tech kennel. Honestly, respect. If you are going to announce that you have brought back an extinct predator, give it a name with a cinematic trailer budget. The headline seemed irresistible. Scientists brought back the dire wolf. The famous dire wolf, the beast that hunted in the Ice Age Americas, which many people first met not through paleontology but through a series full of dragons and questionable script decisions. But there is a problem, a big problem. Perhaps you are not looking at dire wolves. Perhaps you are looking at edited gray wolves. Modern wolves wearing a genetic costume of an extinct animal. A kind of biological deepfake with paws, teeth, and absolutely flawless marketing. And then the question ceases to be just scientific. It becomes almost philosophical. When we say we brought something back, what exactly returned? Think with me, if I take a Volkswagen Beetle, put on a bodywork inspired by a Roman chariot, and go out on the street doing Empire cosplay, have I brought Rome back? No, I brought a reference, a remix. Perhaps a crime against common sense, but not Rome. Now, if I do that with DNA, if I mess with genes and produce a living, breathing, howling animal, the thing becomes less funny and much more disturbing. So before choosing a side, before becoming that uncle in the comments saying it's a lie, or that other one saying, finally Jurassic Park, but with wolves, breathe. Because the truth is more interesting than both extremes. It is not a simple fraud, nor is it a literal resurrection. It is a third thing, a new thing. And perhaps that is exactly why it messes with us so much. The real dire wolf, Enochion dirus, was not just a big wolf with villain-level self-esteem. For a long time, we imagined that a jacked-up cousin of the gray wolf, basically the same creature after 6 months at the gym, creatine, and an aggressive playlist in his headphones. It makes sense. The bones look similar. The general shape is deceiving. It had a canid body, carnivore teeth, that predator presence that doesn't ask permission to enter the food chain. Except genetics came along and did what it loves to do. It ruined the comfortable little story. Studies with ancient DNA showed that dire wolves were a lineage much more distant from modern wolves than appearance suggested. They were not the evolutionary equivalent of a cousin who lives in another city. They were more like that relative whose last name is still similar, but the family split millions of years ago. The direwolf lineage would have split from living canids about 5.7 million years ago. 5.7 million. To our minds, that is before Wi-Fi, but for evolution, it is a respectable abyss. And there is another delightful detail in the scientific sense of the word. Despite living on the same continent as wolves and coyotes for part of history, there is no clear evidence of genetic mixing between them. And canids, let's agree, usually are quite flexible in that department. Wolves, dogs, coyotes. The Canidae family has a relationship akin to an unmoderated WhatsApp group with hybridization. But the dire wolf, apparently, remained isolated. It didn't join the mess. It didn't send a message. It didn't reply to anyone's evolutionary stories. Now hold this image. North America at the end of the Ice Age. No streets, no supermarkets, no I'm just going to order delivery because today I deserve it. The ground is cold, the landscape is open, the herbivores are huge, and death smells like warm blood on the wind. Ancient bison, wild horses, giant sloths, American camels, mastodons. Yes, America once had camels. Nature has always been more surreal than our office imagination allows. In that world, the dire wolf was not a Gothic decoration. It was a function, a pressure, a presence. It was part of a network of hunger, fear, and movement. A predator is not just an animal with teeth. It is a force that organizes the behavior of others. It decides where the prey walks, where it sleeps, when it runs, how many survive. It writes invisible rules on the map, except that map disappeared. When the Pleistocene ended, a lot of big things disappeared with it. The megafauna collapsed in several regions. The climate changed, humans spread, ecosystems were reconfigured, and the dire wolf, perhaps too specialized for a world changing too fast, vanished. This is the part we usually romanticize. Extinction as a noble, almost poetic disappearance. The last howl in the snow. The last footprint erased by the wind. But extinction in practice is much less elegant. It is hunger. It is the absence of pups. It is empty territory. Colossal Biosciences, an American biotechnology company, became famous for an almost indecent ambition: to bring extinct species back, or at least create functional versions of them. Woolly mammoth, dodo, Tasmanian tiger. The menu is basically animals that humanity lost and now wants to find again with technology. It sounds like science fiction until you remember that science fiction today has the shelf life of yogurt. Blink, and it has already become a presentation for investors. In the case of the dire wolf, the company announced that it used ancient DNA as a reference and edited the genome of modern gray wolves. According to the released material itself, there were 20 alterations in 14 genes. The idea was not to take intact ancient DNA, as if there were a Jurassic flash drive waiting for someone to hit copy and paste. Ancient DNA is broken, degraded, full of gaps. It does not come to us as a clean instruction manual. It arrives like a burned, wet, torn book, with pages stuck together and passages missing. So what the team did was more elegant and more controversial. It compared ancient sequences, identified variants associated with characteristics of the dire wolf, and rewrote parts of the genome of a gray wolf to bring it closer to certain characteristics. Light coat, broader head, larger body, muscular traits, vocalizations, things that together make the animal look closer to the image we associate with the dire wolf. But notice, looking like is not being, and yet looking like is not nothing either. Here enters the part that should make you pause for half a second. We live in an era where appearance already governs a lot of things. A filtered photo is not you, but it is not completely someone else either. A digital avatar is not your body, but it can carry your voice. An AI trained with videos of someone dead is not that person back, but it can say he with a resemblance that gives you chills. Now take that to biology. An edited gray wolf is not an original Enochion but if it looks like it, if it moves a certain way, if it howls like that, what does our brain do with this gray area? Tell me something, and here I really want you to think before commenting. Where is the identity of an animal? In the complete DNA, in the body you see, in the behavior, in the evolutionary lineage, or in the role it occupies in the world? Depending on the answer, Romulus, Remus, and Khaleesi change categories. For some, they are functional dire wolves. For others, tuned gray wolves. For still others, a new creature, born from our difficulty in accepting that dead should mean dead. Science has this wonderful problem. Common words are too small for new things. Bringing back is a simple, cartoonish phrase. You lost a sock, found it under the bed, brought it back. You deleted a file, restored it from the recycle bin, brought it back. But an extinct species is not a file in the cloud. There is no complete backup. There is no undo extinction button. What exists is reconstruction, approximation, inference. And inference is a word that doesn't look so sexy in a headline. This does not mean the feed is small. On the contrary, managing to edit wolf cells, create viable embryos, use canine surrogates, produce healthy pups with planned characteristics. That is absurdly difficult. It's not someone painting a dog white and shouting, "The Pleistocene is back, fam." The technique is real. The advance is real. The boldness is real. What is in dispute is the label placed on top of it. And labels matter because labels shape money, attention, public policy, and collective imagination. When a company says we brought the dire wolf back, it is not just describing an experiment. It is invoking a myth. It is pressing a very old emotional button inside us. The promise to correct the irreversible, to visit the past, to pay a debt to nature. It is almost religious. Instead of sacred relics, we have DNA fragments. Instead of monks copying manuscripts, lab coat technicians pipetting molecules. Instead of a miracle, gene editing. But the feeling in the chest is similar. Something that was lost is breathing again, because the world that produced the dire wolf no longer exists. Its ecosystem was dismantled. The prey changed, the climate changed, the landscapes were cut by roads, farms, cities, fences, and mall parking lots. The Ice Age is not waiting in the corner, intact like a VIP room of prehistory. You cannot release an animal inspired by the Pleistocene in 2026 and pretend it is going to reassume an old position at Nature Inc. The department closed. Today there is a gated community in its place, and here the story begins to get morally uncomfortable. While we are enchanted by the idea of resurrecting lost species, thousands of living species continue to disappear silently. No trailer, no mythological name, no magazine cover. An amphibian vanishing in a cloud forest does not go viral. A declining pollinating insect does not get named after a fantasy character. Real, everyday extinction is terrible at marketing. It is slow, ugly, bureaucratic. It looks like an environmental report. And nobody shares an environmental report at Sunday lunch. So the criticism arises, is de-extinction conservation or distraction? Are we using biotechnology to repair nature or to produce moving stories about our own genius? This question has no easy answer. And whoever answers too quickly is probably selling something, on one side or the other, because there is a strong argument in favor. The tools developed to try to recreate traits of extinct animals can help endangered species today, and that matters. Editing genes related to disease resistance, increasing genetic diversity, developing reproductive techniques for small populations, all of this can be valuable. If a technology created on the noisy stage of "let's bring the mammoth back" ends up helping a living species not to disappear, great, truly. Nature doesn't need aesthetic purism. It needs results. But there is a strong argument against. The risk is selling the public the feeling that extinction stopped being a tragedy and became a technical problem. As if destroying habitat were acceptable because, in the future, some laboratory with a minimalist logo could recreate what we lost. This is extremely dangerous. It is the mentality of "I delete now and restore later." Except the biosphere is not a Google Docs document. It doesn't autosave versions every 5 minutes. And perhaps this is the most important turn. The most terrifying part is not that we might manage to bring extinct animals back. It is that we might manage to bring back just enough to sell the feeling that we brought them back. Just enough for the photo, for the headline, for the investor to understand, for the public to cry, for us to feel relief. And relief can be a moral drug. It lets us keep doing bad things, because we imagine someone is building a forgiveness machine. This does not make scientists villains. That simplification would be lazy. Many researchers involved in these areas are serious, brilliant people genuinely concerned with conservation. Scientific curiosity is also one of the most beautiful things about our species. We look at a bone buried for 13,000 years and think, what else can we know from this? The problem begins when curiosity meets the market, and the market discovers that the public loves a resurrection, and we really do love it. The idea of seeing an extinct animal alive messes with a childish and sacred part of the mind. It's like finding a creature that escaped from a book. The dire wolf, the mammoth, the dodo, the Tasmanian tiger, they became cultural ghosts. When someone says, "I can bring this ghost into the room," we look. Of course we look. The problem is that ghosts, when they gain a body, also gain needs. Food, space, fear, pain. A recreated animal is not a walking metaphor. It is a living being. This point is essential. Romulus, Remus, and Khaleesi are not just arguments in an academic dispute. They are not just a proof of concept. They are animals. They have a nervous system. They feel discomfort. They create bonds. They react to the environment. And that changes the moral weight of the conversation. Because on the internet, we discuss as if they were collectible cards. True dire wolf, false dire wolf, gene editing, hype, conservation. But on the other side of the fence, there is a breathing body. And a living body is never just a concept. So perhaps the question is not just, are they dire wolves? Perhaps it is, what responsibility do we have over creatures we created to embody our ideas about the past? That one is heavy. Because human beings have a somewhat complicated track record with creating creatures to serve our narratives. Purebred dogs with respiratory problems because we find flat faces cute. Laboratory animals sacrificed in the name of medical advances. Entire ecosystems rearranged for convenience. When a creature is born from our desire, it is also born within our death. And here enters something I wanted you to comment on in a very specific way. If an extinct species could return, but only to live fenced, observed, managed, without its original world, would that still be a victory? Or would it be a kind of living museum? Don't answer with a slogan. Really think. Because there is a difference between saving a life and collecting an appearance. The word de-extinction sounds clean, almost magical. It suggests that extinction is a switch you turn on and off. Extinct. Not extinct. Done. But biologically, things are much muddier. A species is not just an appearance, nor is it just a DNA sequence. A species is population, reproduction, evolutionary history, ecological interaction, learned behavior, microbiome, environment. It is an entire soap opera, not a genetic ID number. When you recreate a few traits, perhaps you produce a rhyme. Not the complete poem, but rhymes have power. Do not underestimate that. Biology is full of approximations that matter. A functionally similar animal can, in certain contexts, fulfill similar ecological roles. A population with restored genes can resist better. An edited organism can carry back a lost characteristic. Absence of evidence is not evidence of absence, and it would be too arrogant to say that none of this can ever have ecological value. Perhaps in some cases it will. Perhaps in others, it is just a show. The difficult part will be separating one thing from the other when there is a lot of money, a lot of vanity, and a lot of cameras turned on. Deep down, the dire wolf became a mirror. We look at it and think we are seeing the past, but we are seeing ourselves. Our ecological guilt, our hunger for control, our inability to accept limits, our technical genius, which is real, and our moral immaturity, which also is. We are the species that destroys habitat and then invents a company to rebuild the animal that needed that habitat. This is tragic. It is brilliant. It is ridiculous. It is very us. And perhaps that is why this story sticks in the mind. Because it is not about wolves, not completely. It is about our relationship with death. The death of individuals, the death of species, the death of worlds. For almost all of human history, extinction was destiny. A thing vanished and that was it. At most, bones, paintings, stories, names remained. Now, for the first time, we are entering a zone where collective biological death can be partially negotiated. Partially. That word is everything. Not defeated, not undone. Negotiated. Imagine an Ice Age human seeing a real dire wolf on the horizon. He wouldn't think, what an incredible opportunity for genetic conservation. He would think something more direct. If I slip up, I become lunch. For him, that animal was a threat, a neighbor, a natural force. For us, it became a project, a brand, a debate. The same predator crossed history and changed functions. From a real danger to a symbol domesticated by technology, we like to think we are restorers, but often we are editors. We cut one part, paste another, improve the lighting, change the title, sell it as a return. Ever since we painted bison in caves, we have tried to capture the animal, first with pigment, then with myth, then with a museum, now with a genome. The difference is that pigment doesn't feel pain. Myth doesn't need an enclosure. A museum doesn't bark in the middle of the night. So did humans really bring the dire wolf back? The honest answer is not the way the headline makes it seem. Not as a perfect resurrection. Not as a portal open to the Pleistocene. Not as if an extinct animal had logged out for 13,000 years and now returned to the old account. What we brought back was something stranger. Gray wolves edited to carry certain traits of an extinct lineage. A living approximation. A question walking on four legs, and that is perhaps more important than a yes or no. Because the future rarely arrives in a clean form. It arrives messy, ambiguous, poorly labeled, with a press release, academic criticism, excited investors, and people in the comments fighting in all caps. The future arrives like Romulus, Remus, and Khaleesi. Beautiful, uncomfortable, irresistible, and perhaps a little less true than we would like. In the beginning, I placed you in front of a fence. On the other side, 3 white pups ran like living fragments of a lost era. Now look again. They are still there, except the scene has changed. You are not just seeing the past. You are seeing a choice. Do we want to repair or just impress? Do we want to conserve ecosystems or collect ghosts? Do we want to accept that certain losses should transform us, or do we want to buy a high-resolution version of them? And if this question bothered you, comment in the most honest way possible. Do you think recreating traits of an extinct species is a legitimate form of scientific redemption, or a sophisticated way to escape guilt? Don't just comment yes or no. Comment where, for you, a copy stops being a copy and begins to become another life with its own value. Because this line, whether we like it or not, is going to become increasingly important. Perhaps the dire wolf did not return. Perhaps only an echo returned. But sometimes the echo is enough to reveal the size of the cave. And the cave is us.